a silent museum, a silent and practically invisible museum, a museum that can be put inside any other museum. And, as we know, perception is the museum in this world. Anytime you see, anytime you perceive, you are constituting some sort of a museum, the museum of the human being, the museum of that which the human program sees and experiences. The museum of the human program is an exposition of the human program. The museum of the future is to see how the human program works inside us. How perception works, how the interpretation machine works, how our own projection machine works, how we perceive and why we perceive in the way that we perceive. So the museum of the future, the museum of the human program, the museum that exposes the human program, can be put inside any other museum. From MoMA to the Met, to the Guggenheim, to a little kiosk in the street, in any city, in any countryside road, anywhere. The museum of the future and the museum of the human program is that which is meant to be a self-reflexive state, to see ourselves, to see the human program at work, to see the way perception works, to see the way the interpretation machine works, to see how we perceive in the way that we perceive and why we perceive and interpret in the way that we perceive and interpret, to see how the human program creates the world as we experience it. So this is the museum of the future. It can exist anywhere, and it should exist anywhere. It should exist in every human being in this world. It should not only exist in museums. It should not only be a part of the art world. It should be a part of human life. It should be a part of society. It should be a part of how we see ourselves. It should be a part of our own practice of reflection when it comes to the human program in which we live. A museum that is non-existent, that doesn't exist anywhere else than in the mind and brain of the person who sees this museum inside himself. The museum of the human program, the museum of the future, is to see the human program at work. So anytime we see that, the museum is activated. The museum exists inside our own mind-brain system. It can stand as a museum in all its splendor on Fifth Avenue in New York, or it can be in a dusty little kiosk on the road of a small city somewhere that no one knows about. And it can be inside our own mind-brain system. It is a virtual museum. It's a museum that, of course, is a conceptual strategy. This museum is conceptual art, but without representation. The representation is simply the knowledge of the fact that it exists. The existence of the museum is simply a knowledge of the fact that it exists. The museum of the future exists, and it exists when we are aware of it, when we see ourselves. To see the museum of the future is to see the human program at work, which means to see how our own mind-brain system works. To see all the things that the interpretation machine is built on. What is it that controls our interpretations? Well, there are many hidden belief systems, many hidden language games, many hidden paradigms that we take for granted, that we have conditioned ourselves with. And this conditioning is controlling how the interpretation machine works. And when the interpretation machine gives its material to the projection machine, then we come into the belief systems. Then we start to believe that which we perceive. And we believe these things. This is a part of the way that the human program works. The Museum of the Future is a silent museum that can exist anywhere. It is a carry-on museum. Anyone can keep it in his pocket or in her handbag or anywhere. Even in the makeup mirror, the Museum of the Future can exist in the makeup mirror of women and of men, because men need to freshen up too sometimes, with a little bit of that and a little bit of that, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Who knows? So the Museum of the Future is a mirror to existence. It's a mirror of life. It's to see the human program at work when we experience anything that we experience in our human program as such. Because that is that in which we live. We live inside the human program, we live inside the perception mechanisms of the human program, and we live inside the system that controls the way that we interpret and project. So this is a part of the Museum of the Future that should exist anywhere in this world and be a part of any human being who is interested in seeing the human program in himself or in herself. Thank you.